All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Julie Bliven, and I'm here with the creators of The Remarkable Rescue at Milkweed Meadow, author Elaine Demopoulos and illustrator Doug Salati. I'm an editor here at Charlesbridge. We are a publisher just outside Boston, Massachusetts. And I just want to introduce Elaine and Doug before we start talking about this incredible title. And yeah, so Elaine, you're joining us today from Massachusetts. Elaine is the author of the recent middle grade novel, Turn the Tide, which is a novel in verse inspired by real world environmental activism. She's also the author of a YA novel, Material Girl. Elaine has served as the Associates of the Boston Public Library Writer in Residence and has taught at Simmons University and Grub Street. And we also have Doug here today. He is the illustrator of several books for children, including Lawrence in the Fall. Oh, hi, everyone. So the live went, okay, I'll just keep going. And Doug is also the illustrator of this year's Caldecott winner, Hot Dog, author illustrator. And he's joining us today from New York. He has studied at the School of Visual Arts and has also been a Sendak Fellow. And he's joining us today from New York. It is really a rare and special opportunity to get to talk live and in person and in front of so many readers and educators about a book, you know, before and after it's published. This one will be published in less than 30 days. It's May 24th. And it's already received 3-star reviews from Booklist, Kirkus, Publishers Weekly. We are just really humbled by how much love it's been getting. And so without further ado, Elaine, I would love for you to tell us what exactly your book is about.
Sure thing, Julie, and thank you so much to Charlesbridge for hosting this webinar. I'm really excited to talk about the book, and it's such an honor to have you and Doug here. Right, so The Remarkable Rescue at Milkweed Meadow is a middle grade animal adventure story. It's about a colony of rabbits with a strong storytelling tradition and also a belief that rabbits are superior to other species. So the story is actually about a young rabbit named Butternut who must sort of push back against her family's strict rules and beliefs, first in order to make friends with other meadow creatures, and then ultimately to organize a daring rescue of creatures in need. And there is sort of a fun cast of side characters in this book. Butternut's best friend is this sort of irrepressibly cheerful robin named Piper who speaks alliteratively. There is a cautious deer with a broken leg. There is a spiteful bully, blue jay, who kind of bullies everybody in the meadow. There's a hungry coyote on the prowl, and there is an eavesdropping child as well. So ultimately, the novel celebrates compassion and courage and doing the right thing. And it is certainly a celebration of stories and how stories are so important and they can change our lives.
Thank you for that, Elaine. I'm especially glad that you gave us a little taste and a little sense of the characters in the book, because when this story came across my desk, it was evident right away that it was a strong, tight plot, which is important for this audience, you know, for any good novel, but also for this age level 10 and up. But the diverse and developed characters, I mean, to have both, you know, was just amazing. So that was why it was a no-brainer to acquire this immediately. And I'm so happy it landed at Charlesbridge. So, you know, before it came across my desk, you know, you were writing away, and I would love to talk a little bit about your inspiration for the book. And it's sort of a two-parter question, your inspiration, and then maybe you could talk about who you think the book is for. And I'm not sure if those questions overlap or not, but I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah. So I, growing up, had always been a fan of animal stories, always. Charlotte's Web, Watership Down, Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim, and more recently, sort of anything by Kate DiCamillo or Kathy Appelt. I'm just, such a fan. I feel like animal stories are so charming, and they can be both serious and funny, right? So there's just a lot you can do with them. So I'd always wanted to write one. And on a very basic level, in 2017, I moved to a suburban home near a meadow, and I looked out my window and my cast of characters became the animals that sort of, were outside. Very kind of Beatrix Potter, right? She sort of looked at rabbits playing in the yard, and then we had Peter Rabbit. So I know a lot of creators do that. But I will say that also I was teaching at Simmons University at the time. I've taught in some form or another for 20 years, and the last 6 have been spent teaching writing for children in the MFA program. So I was teaching writing, and I was just talking and thinking and reading about basically all of the craft elements that make a spectacular story, right? Like how to create a sympathetic character, who isn't perfect, how to create sort of a really enticing conflict that builds to a climax, how to work in humor, how to develop like a really memorable, distinctive narrative voice. And also just, I was thinking a lot about how great stories create or have in them some kind of truth that readers respond to, right? So I effectively put all of those elements into this, or try to, and you'll see if you read the book that as Butternut narrates, she draws attention to the parts of the story she's in. She draws attention to these elements. She's like, now I'm talking about the beginning of the story, and here, this is the conflict. So in terms of who it's for, to answer your second question, I actually think it is a wonderful book that could be used to teach storycraft in a classroom because these elements are so clear. Generally who it's for, I think it's for anyone who loves stories, like young or old. I think it's, I'll just say I love reading stories aloud to my own children. It's been one of the great pleasures, certainly during the pandemic, something that sustained us all. And I wrote this story intending that it could be a read aloud. I know some readers like to just have it kind of quietly between them, but I think this story could be a read aloud either between parent and child, or a read aloud in a classroom. So again, if you're a teacher that maybe has read Charlotte's Web for many years and you're looking for a new book to slot in, I think this could be, The Remarkable Rescue at Milkweed Meadow could be a choice.
Yes. Oh, for sure. I think Doug will talk a little bit about this too, but the setting, my goodness, when you have, that tight plot, these diverse and developed characters, and then the setting, I love how you keep mentioning Charlotte's Web, which also to me, that setting is just, I'm there next to Fern, in that yard. The setting, of course, is Milkweed Meadow and is really vivid throughout, which I also think contributes to how it has that read aloud appeal. Doug, I love seeing you nodding throughout, animal stories, that's for me. And you are that reader. So I would love to hear a little bit about why this story made you want to illustrate it and bring it to life. And a little bit about your experience, maybe, the difference between illustrating, a emergent middle grade book compared to a picture book.
Oh, it's so fun to listen to Elaine talk about the book, because I think, we were talking earlier before we hopped on, I think the reason why I just immediately clicked with reading the manuscript because it was exactly the kind of thing I loved to read as a kid. And I feel like I was one of those kids who was always daydreaming, like looking out the window, or like when we were driving in the car, like looking at the woods as we were going somewhere and thinking like, well, what's in there? Like, are there animals in there? Are there, magical things going on in there? And I was always kind of daydreaming about kind of exiting normal life and going into some sort of kind of, Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim life, where you could connect with and talk to these talking animals, and kind of go into this separate world. And who wouldn't want to do that, So I think that, once I realized that's what this was, it was like, okay, here we go, and the writing you were talking about the idea of so many different characters with so many different personalities, different personality traits. And to me, I really loved kind of seeing myself in, or parts of myself in all of them, right? Which I think is a pretty natural, normal, healthy thing, right? Because one day you feel kind of as like vivacious as Piper, and that you feel confident and you can do it, and then the next day you feel maybe a little more like Butternut and thinking, okay, I don't know, I've got these doubts, and those doubts build. And so it's so nice to have something to relate to, in terms of the characters. Um, in terms of that second part there, the book, the picture book versus the chapter book. This is the first time that I've gotten to illustrate the format of a novel or chapter book, and so that's always an exciting thing, to do something new. And I wanted to make sure that it, hopefully kind of stood on um, the same ground as some of the amazing, books that I used to read, and used to look for those illustrations as a kind of guidepost, and to kind of supplement maybe what I was imagining in my own mind, and then to just have those kind of expand what I, as the reader, was already imagining. So I feel like they're more, instead of really relying on the pictures, it's more of just those points of light that you hit along the way to expand, the world that you're imagining.
That's beautifully said, and I especially love the part about just how relatable the characters are, and I feel like I can see in your artwork how, you just really sort of didn't miss a beat in getting everyone's personality, each character's personality. We've got, that timid, sort of anxious Butternut here. I mean, each time I met a character through your sketches, I felt, oh, yes. I mean, this still, when Butternut and Piper meet, just the warmth, between that dynamic, and Piper, even just the eager neck. You're talking about Piper being so eager, and you see it in even just the posture you've given these characters. I mean, just how powerful one image can be is so profound. And yes, that really comes across, and comes across in your artwork. I just want to pause here for a minute and just say that to everyone listening, if you do have questions, if anything Doug and Elaine is sharing today sparks a question or something you want to share, you can put it in the chat, and we may have some time at the end to have Doug and Elaine answer some of those questions for you. But I can't wait to continue to ask some more questions in the meantime. So Elaine, sort of piggybacking on that idea where, this is Doug's first time illustrating this genre. This is also your first time writing, and knowing that Doug is going to eventually bring art alongside these alternating chapters. So what was that like for you?
Sure. So I have to tell this story, so get comfortable, because I feel like I have Doug here and I never told it, and I have this opportunity with that question. So I will say that as I wrote the manuscript, I did think this could have, illustrations along the way, sort of in every other chapter. I was sort of like, that it's a slimmer book. It could lends itself to sort of having illustrations add another element. So I had talked to my agent about it, but nothing was set. So the story is that Doug and I are actually represented by the same agency, even though we have different agents, and the agents were talking to each other. And my agent, was telling Doug's agent about the project, and his agent said, well, this is a great project for Doug. Like, what about Doug? And so my agent came back to me, and she's so wonderful. And this is why she's so wonderful. And she said, here's an idea. I think you might like his work. Just go on the website and, there was a portfolio, as there are, of kind of, artists' work, and just take a look. No pressure. And this was so early. Like, we had just started working together. And it is not typical for, an author to be paired with an artist before the book is acquired. Usually the manuscript is acquired and then that happens later. So I went back and I found the email that I wrote to my agent, Ali Helligers, in response to looking at Doug's art, just his sketches. And I wrote, this is January 9th, 2020. Okay. Swoon. And there's a million O's. Hearts, stars, universe tilting. I love Doug's classic style, his palettes, his fine details that invite the reader to look closer. His animals are charming without being cloying. A little Edward Gorey, no? As such, he would nail the tone of Milkweed Meadow. And then I thank my agent so much for making this connection. And then I write, I won't get my hopes too high since he might not be interested or available, but he gets a resounding endorsement from me. So it was love at first sight. It was definitely like, because, and specifically with animal illustrations, I feel like there's a spectrum between fully naturalistic and then fully anthropomorphized, right? So you can have animals that, are out in nature and they have no facial expressions at all. And on the other end, you can have an animal like in clothes driving a car, right? And I think that this is where like my vision for the book and Doug's vision for Doug's style of art and just his vision aligned beautifully, because I think he's more on the naturalistic side. I think you are, and yet the faces of the animals are so expressive. Their gestures, their eyes, told so much about how they were feeling. So it was an absolute pleasure when Doug was like, I think I would like to maybe, go out with this together. And the process was, I saw initial sketches. I was like, yes, I have no comments, nothing. And then even when the sketches came in, it was more like, I was like, whatever moments speak to him to illustrate, like, that's great. I don't want any control of that process. I think that, he should sort of pick the moments that work. And then, my comments were like, oh, the stoop should be a little bit lower, because they're logistical things, but nothing. It was just magic. It was magic from the beginning. And I think the end result, like this cover, I've gotten so many compliments on the cover. I'm like, I didn't draw it. So, it was fantastic. It was just such a blessing. So.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, Elaine. Doug, do you have any response to that? The original
how do you respond
email.
to that?
I know.
How do you respond to that? That's kind of, like the complete dream is that all, collaborators feel like their work is being taken care of and represented in a way that they're happy about. So thanks, Elaine, for sharing that. Yeah, I think that, just to stick to, what Elaine, the moment or the time that Elaine was talking about. Yeah, that early phase is really a favorite of mine, because, that first read of the manuscript where you're really just starting to understand and get to know the characters and the story. Everything is possible at that point, and then you have to kind of start to kind of form and shape the characters. And my first kind of go-to thing is to do some research, so, and I'd like to definitely draw from life or draw from reference, and then try to put it away and then see kind of what comes out through, my own filter, so that it does, the pictures make sure that the characters are emoting, I guess, in that human way that we are discussing in the book, and all of those different facets of being kind of an emotional human or animal, I guess. So, so I would look at, I think I found these great like conservation videos from like the 70s on YouTube that were a video of like, here's a rabbit in the fields of Iowa, and there was just great footage. And I liked that they were moving. instead of still, because I just felt there was just so much action in this book, and I wanted to make sure that that energy that Elaine was writing with, that I was portraying, also in the pictures, So it started in that way, and then we kind of said, okay, how can I kind of get away from the reference and then start to really kind of shape them as their final look and character.
I love hearing about that process. And I just want to weigh in from the editor publisher side that it's pretty rare to get a manuscript with an artist suggested at the same time. And if that does happen, our art director or creative director might say, well, let's, this seems like a great idea, but maybe let's just open the door to some other possibilities as well and just make sure we're doing our due diligence. That was not the case with this book. It was, oh yes, this, and we were it was sort of becoming this, we sort of had this refrain in-house that was like, yes, his art is so classic and timeless, but also perfect for contemporary readers. Like, I can't get over how many times that's what we were saying, and it was just so spot on. And I just felt so grateful that that vision was so succinct when the book came to me, and that there was no question in-house as well that your work would be just right, Doug. And you both sort of touched upon the cover, or Elaine, you might have, but Doug, what you said about that movement and energy of Elaine's writing and then seeing it in your artwork, that I think is just the recipe that makes this cover too. That movement and energy is just, I mean, I see it out in the wild, and it's so striking, and it just jumps next to, anything else on the shelf or online. And it's just, and by the shelf, I mean at all the shows we've had so far, because it's not out until next month when you will see it on all the shelves popping out. And yeah, so, we've touched a little bit upon how the artwork does set the tone for the book. And these gorgeous end papers give us a map of the meadow and the home where the humans live alongside these creatures. And, so Doug, you touched a little bit about art as sort of a guidepost, but these end papers just kind of make me think about your art as sort of a roadmap for this, these emergent readers who are getting some illustrations throughout a novel. And so I was just wondering a little bit about, do you think about that? How do you think your work sort of serves alongside the text as another sort of roadmap to the story, so to speak?
Yeah. And I can't remember. I don't think the map was my idea.
I think it was Elaine. Yeah, it was Elaine's idea. And yes.
Which was brilliant, because I have a stack of books next to me, of some chapter books with black and white illustrations that I was looking to. And of course, one of them is A.A. Milne, Winnie the Pooh, and there's that amazing classic map, at the very beginning of those end pages that I felt, I was like, oh yeah, of course, that's just so in line with the type of thing that we're trying to do. And I was thrilled, and kind of, I mean, it was one of the more challenging things, because and I, in hindsight, I probably should have said, hey, Elaine, send me what, send me a Google Earth view of where you're at. And I didn't. And I tried to just from the text, right, from Elaine's words, I thought, well, I have enough information here. I have everything I need to know. So I think what I love, maybe more so in chapter books than picture books, is that you just have more time to really get to know these characters, to get to know the environment, and to share more. So with that opening, I think is there a little feedback from me? Can you hear any noise, or is it Great. Okay. Sorry. With the end pages, I think what I love so much is that it's kind of like, I think of books sometimes maybe as theater, and where you go see a play, you go see a show, the curtain opens and you have kind of an establishing shot. Or if you're right, same thing perhaps with a movie. And I know that a lot of picture book folks that I've talked to, they think that way. And I think it's really useful because you just want to have an establishing centering point to the universe that you're about to go into. And I think kind of goes back to what I was saying before. Like, I always want to kind of suspend disbelief and be able to cross over, into that world that I don't really live in, but I want to live in for as long as I'm, spending time with this book for 30 minutes every night, or, whatever pace I'm reading it at. And I think that's, to me, what was such a brilliant idea about those end pages, was that you really survey the scene. You see everywhere that Butternut and the rest of the characters are referencing in the book. And you can really see yourself in each one of those areas, and you're good to go in that way. You're ready to kind of dive in.
Yes, I don't think many young readers will, once they begin the story, will need much motivation to continue. But what you described, Doug, is sort of like the curtains opening. I think it's really motivating for that 10 plus age range, right? Like, where am I going to find myself? So, as I enter the story. So I couldn't agree more about really just setting the stage and, giving, there aren't illustrations in every chapter, but there's certainly the opportunity to go back here and reference it. So in that way, it's can become interactive, in picture book like in that way. And I just love that. I love that Elaine had that idea, and Diane Early was the art director for this book, and loved working with you, Doug. I mean, it's sort of any sort of deliberate, intentional printed end sheets can just, get us, just send me over the moon, and Diane as well. Especially when there's purpose behind them, and they're just so intentional. So we just couldn't love that more. But you did have one idea, Doug, that surprised us all that we weren't expecting, which is the chapter spots. So we knew you would be, I've showed you a few, but we knew Elaine and Diane and I all knew that there would be, these half spread illustrations every other chapter. There's a surprising full spread illustration at one point, which we won't give away. But we were not anticipating these elegant, thoughtful chapter spots. Each chapter, Doug, you put something for the readers to delight in that has to do with the chapter at hand. So what made you want to make that choice? And, just tell us about where you're coming from in that regard.
Listen, my only regret is that I didn't draw more of Elaine's, anything. It really, it's just one of those stories and one of those texts that it's inspiring, right? I mean, it just inspires you to draw, when you read a great story, or you see, a piece of dance performance, or you hear beautiful music, and you just kind of feel like your best self, and kind of really happy to be alive. I mean, that's kind of what I'm talking about, is that I just kept reading, and I thought, oh, well, we just got to add something more, or I want to, I want to. So it really just comes back to how in every chapter there was momentum, there was something new, there was new detail, and it kept shifting and it kept growing. So I just thought that yeah, this deserves, just a little small kind of starting point, seasoning, I guess, just a
Yeah.
visually, right? So there were so many parts, there were some stories that Butternut tells, right? And throughout the book, I thought, oh, you really should have, illustrated those, and put those in there. But you'll just have to imagine those. But yeah, I thought of them, I wanted to just add a little extra something because some of those chapters, like you mentioned, they they don't have the full page. So I just wanted maybe, a visual point of reference for every chapter to kind of tie the start of each new story of each new chapter.
Yeah. Elaine, you were through the moon when you got this, you were over the moon when you got those spots. Did that just feel like it was bringing everything together for you in terms of the overall design?
I think when you forwarded me the news, I think in your subject heading, you used the word gift. You were like, this is such a gift for, Milkweed Meadow. And that's what it really was. And it's so wonderful. I mean, I've read the book since I got my hard copy aloud to my children, and it was an absolutely interactive sort of like, what do you think, can we make predictions from this? Or, which plant is this referencing? Is it the rabbit siblings are all named after foods rabbits eat. So a bunch of them end up being those spots, and sort of like, which one do you think this is, and why will that character be important in the chapter? And yeah, it sort of works on you subtly to further, I think, enhance the setting, right? To just sort of say, like, you get to actually see these elements that I talk about, that I write about. And they're just so wonderful. Thank you, Doug, for going above and beyond, really.
My pleasure.
For me, when I'm wearing my editor hat, I'm always thinking about a book's rereadability. So when the spots came in, and I do remember calling them a gift, I just thought of my child self rereading this book again and again, and feeling the familiarity of remembering based on the image and the spot of what was going to happen in that chapter, but then maybe not remembering everything and getting that delight again. So I thought it was going, I feel like it'll amplify the rereadability as well.
And there was something I remember, feeling reading the book where, and maybe because it's this wildlife setting, and I was always daydreaming about kind of like being like a field scientist, sketching animals in the wild. But I kind of felt like, right, I was just kind of peering in on everything that was happening. And, I was walking around the fields or the meadow or behind the house or in the woods, and I was kind of documenting, right? Documenting these little bits and pieces, and then bringing them back to share with the reader. So yeah, I think Elaine, said it so well, in that the images can kind of spark, the curiosity of the reader, or act as like a clue of, what's to come. And I know I always loved that when I was a kid reading chapter books.
Yes. Well, these readers are in for it, and will. And speaking of these readers, Elaine, it's we keep saying how this feels like this classic timeless book, and we all would have loved it, and it's really for anyone, and I couldn't agree more. So why does it also work right now at this point in time? Timeless, classic, and also ripe for today's contemporary reader.
Sure. Well, I like the term timeless. I think it's kind of applied to things, to books like this. But every book comes out of a writer's experience of a specific time and place, right? I mean, if you go back and you say, oh, this book felt timeless. Well, if it was written 30 years ago, there are going to be elements from that time and maybe what was going on nationally, politically, personally in the writer's life, you know? And so for this book, I think that my emphasis thematically on community over factionalism, on, you know, the importance of finding common ground even when you don't have everything in common with somebody, really kind of reflects what I was feeling, I think, in 2018 and 2019 when this, when I got the idea for the book and I started writing the first draft. And I felt like we were just sort of getting to this point where we were normalizing the us and them mentality, right? And I kind of wanted to scream, you know, it hasn't always been this way, and it doesn't always have to be this way, and it shouldn't be this way. And so I think that's in the book, you know, right? That's kind of poured out in that way. Yeah, so I think that is definitely one reason why this book is significant and germane to right now, even though it, you know, I hope, I mean, I've said this before, like my hope is that, my greatest hope as a writer is that a child will read this book today and then remember that they liked it when they grow up and then pull it off the shelf and maybe hand it to their own child and say, I liked this when I was a kid, like try it out. And, you know, who knows if that will happen with this book, with any book, but I feel like, you know, it hopefully has that sort of enduring quality as well. I also want to mention, in terms of your question about, you know, the significance of this moment, my protagonist, Butternut, she has high anxiety. And I mentioned that I taught for 20 years. And over those 20 years, I just watched my students' anxiety level go up. And with every sort of subsequent year, and I remember, gosh, 20 years ago, like got kids like hanging out, like easy breezy, right? And now, you know, for a number of reasons, I remember just students talking to me about their anxiety, sort of seeing it manifest in the classroom. And I wanted to reflect that in the novel. And I wanted to create a character who is anxious, yet does something absolutely extraordinary, right? And the novel isn't a parable about getting rid of your anxiety, right? Because that doesn't happen. You know, it is just about kind of accepting it and saying, you know what, I'm going to find courage in spite of it, and I'm going to do this extraordinary thing. And I think that message of sort of, no matter who we are, we can all do extraordinary things with the love and support of family and friends, which is very important. You know, that is something I wanted to put in the book. And I think that is a super important lesson for this moment in time. And so it makes the book, the timeless book, I think, timely.
Yes. Yeah, that was really my favorite part. And what I think is a little different and exceptional, Elaine, about how you handle that is that sometimes I see in books that we as the reader get to see that a character like Butternut is brave and extraordinary in spite of something. But what I think you do is you show us that Butternut realizes that she can be brave and extraordinary while she's still struggling with that anxiety. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of like brought it to that more realized level that I think maybe kids today will appreciate all the more and will find that relatability that much more. So I think that was just so well done and always at the heart of this book from the first read. So yes, oh gosh, I love this character, which is why I'm so glad, Elaine, you can tell everyone here today that they might get, well, not might, that they will get to go on a few more extraordinary adventures with Butternut. Can you give us a little teaser about book number 2?
Absolutely. I cannot believe I got to write book number 2 and then it's going to be published and that Doug is illustrating it again. This is, it's a dream. It's an absolute dream. So this is, as you know, called The Remarkable Rescue at Milkweed Meadow. The sequel is called The Perilous Performance at Milkweed Meadow. And in it, a theatrical troupe of turkeys comes to Milkweed Meadow in the summer, at the beginning of the summer, and they say, we want to put on a show. We want to involve the entire meadow in a giant kind of spectacular musical production. And one thing you learn right at the beginning of the book is that at the end of the kind of production, there's a fire. There's been a fire. And part of the mystery is who started this fire? How did it start? And that's one thing that Butternut, sort of, that's her story in this book, to sort of explain that all. And in the sequel, I got to explore the interaction between humans and animals a little more deeply, which was one of the reasons I really wanted to write it. And I had such fun doing that. And I'll say, I think the sequel asks the question, since stories and storytelling are such a big part of this world, of Butternut's world, what happens when stories turn into lies? So Butternut has to sort of wrestle with that question, and the ethics around storytelling and lies and truth telling, and learns about that. So I'm excited.
Yes. Yeah, in the first book, I feel like we get to see Butternut sort of trust herself. And then in this book, as the community has expanded and sort of come together, and then these new characters arrive, it's sort of like, how do you trust something new or different, or, so your themes, there's some overlap, but then there's this wonderful new opening of a new door in many ways. So I'm so excited. And Doug, I'd love to hear what it's like for you to get to revisit some of these beloved characters, sort of, as you're with those field scientist binoculars on, but also now getting to create new characters in the second story.
Yeah, it was so great listening to you, Elaine, talk about Butternut, because I feel like there's something so dimensional about Butternut as a character, all of the characters, but that idea of that, with just figuring out who you are, how you make decisions, how you navigate new experiences, new relationships. I just feel like all of these things are so relatable, and the dimension of the character it just makes it so real for readers, I think, or just makes it so real for me, because that's kind of life, whether you're a kid or an adult, in terms of all these different changes and experiences. And so it's so fun to just go back to these characters that I got to know, for a certain set of time and certain parameters, and then to kind of, again, just see their world expand a little bit, and then see how they respond, to that expansion, challenges, good and bad. So it's been great.
Yeah. Oh, it's very exciting. Is there anything either of you would like to share that you didn't get a chance to, or anything you want to tell each other or ask each other? I mean, this is just such a, like I said, a rare and special thing. You're both so busy working on so many amazing projects and doing so much publicity and promotional work. And so getting a chance to just, to me, this has been just such a peaceful part of my day. Just hearing you both talk, I could listen all day. So I want to give you an opportunity to share anything else, or, like I said, ask each other anything. And it's okay if you feel like we've covered it all. You've shared so much, and
Oh no, I could ask Doug questions for another hour. No, what I would say is I want to thank Doug so I did a bunch of research on animals, as one does, but I really did want to, the rabbits in this book are Eastern cottontails, and, I researched sort of like the robins build eggs and how that, what they are, the kind of the hatchlings and then the nestlings and the fledglings. Like, I did a lot of research, and I think that Doug then took the manuscript and also did a ton of research, which I'm so grateful for. And he helped me. Like, we were, through Diane or Julie, we would kind of get feedback. And there were a couple of changes that ended up happening in the story because Doug had found something in his research that you know, I needed to make sure I included. I mean, one example early on was, you know, it's like rabbits live in, you know, these kind of large warrens underground. Well, Eastern cottontails don't. They can kind of take over a groundhog's burrow and you know, like, and they do often. And so I had to, you know, make sure I made that clear. And that's why, you know, the rabbits in this story had it. So like, and there were a couple moments like that where I would make a narrative change just based on feedback. So I felt like it was a really, I mean, you know, we worked together to produce something even stronger because there were two of us and not just one. So I just want to thank you, Doug, for, you know, I mean, really putting the time in to sort of say, like, what, you know, who are these characters? What are the animals like representing these characters? What would they naturally do? Because I do think that's really important, that you could read this book and of course they talk, right? Like it's fantasy, yes, but you know, it's based very firmly in realism. And so that I think strengthened the book. And just, yeah, for everything. My gosh, what a beautiful, I just paw it all the time. I just put my hands over it. So thank you for everything.
Yes.
Oh, no, I mean, the art is really the icing, you know. I mean, the core of the book is, as readers know, is the story, and everyone is just, I can't wait till everyone can get it in their hands and experience it. And but that to me is a total treat too, you know, when you just happen to be paired with someone who you know, I feel like we had similar investment in some of those details, and that makes it easy and fun and totally enriching, you know, as a creative endeavor, you know. So thank you.
Yes. I think that you just nailed it, Doug, in saying that you both had such an investment in the project. I think we can all gather from this conversation how much attention to detail you each bring to your craft and how serious you take your craft. And it's just a privilege to get to hear some insights about how you both, you know, made this book and you brought it to life with your illustrations, Doug, and Elaine, storytelling. It's just tremendous. So I'm just so excited as well. May 24th, next month. And that is the right date, right? Yes, May 24th. Yes. So thank you so much, Elaine and Doug, for joining us. Charles Ridge is just, we're so honored to have you on our list. And yes, and thanks again for being here. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you,
Take
Doug.
care.
Thank you.